Well, good morning, everyone. We are recording the commercial holiday breakfast for 2022, and we have Nadia Evangelou with the National Association of Realtors research staff going to talk about commercial.
Thank you, Susie, and good morning, everyone. It's such a pleasure to meet with all of you today, and I'd like to thank you for giving me the opportunity to discuss with you about the latest trends in the commercial real estate just before starting the new year. So after a year of the multiple offer frenzy, like the housing market, where we see has slowed down in 2022, inflation and mortgage rates rose significantly with mortgage rates more than double than those a year ago, and inflation hitting 40-year highs, hurting affordability, both of them hurting affordability. Although the economy recover all the jobs that lost due to the pandemic, wages didn't keep up with the pace of inflation. The labor market has been robust, and the pace of the wage growth has been the best in about 20 years, but inflation continues to run well above the Federal Reserve 2% target. Within the last year, income has increased by 5%, while inflation rose by nearly 7%. In the meantime, recently, and this is very welcoming, is that we see that both of inflation and mortgage rates are finally coming down, while the Federal Reserve has switched to smaller rate hikes. So the big question is how the real estate market, and especially the commercial real estate markets, will perform next year, assuming that inflation will continue to slow down and mortgage rates to stabilize. So this is the question that we will try to respond today here. But before discussing about that, let's first take a look at some, I think, very important indicators, economic indicators that will help us understand better the market. So I will start sharing my screen. Just bear with me. And I think you're able to see, right? Yes.
Yeah.
So, and I think we should start first with the labor market. So it's remarkable to see these strong job gains that we had, specifically, the economy was able to recover all the jobs that were lost in the beginning of the pandemic. Actually, there are more jobs now than back in March of 2020 when the pandemic hit our country. Specifically, there are about 2.5 million more jobs now than in March of 2020. In the meantime, unemployment rate is near record lows, which indicates below the 4%, which indicates how strong the labor market is, since it shows how many people who want a job and are available for work can find a job. In fact, there are still 2 jobs for every unemployed person. Thus, the job market recovery after the pandemic has been remarkably rapid compared to other notable recoveries in recent history. But then when we take a look at the job creation by area, we see that there are substantial variations in job growth across the country. For instance, as you can see here in the map, Utah and Idaho are the 2 states with the fastest employment growth across the country. Actually, it's very promising to see that more and more states are joining the list with job gains, such as Montana, Florida, Texas, Georgia, or the Carolinas. So in these states, as you can see in the map with the blue color, not only the local economy was able to recover the jobs that were lost due to the pandemic, but there are actually more jobs now than back then, back in March of 2020. Nevertheless, what we see, unfortunately, is that's not the case for Connecticut or the Norwich, New London metro area. For example, in Connecticut, we see that we are still missing about 16,000 jobs in order to be back to the pre-pandemic level, about 1% fewer jobs we have now. And in the Norwich, New London metro area, we are missing about 6,000 jobs. That is about 4% below the pre-pandemic level. That's in both these areas, we still need even more jobs to be added to the market in order to be back to say that, yes, we are back to the pre-pandemic level. Then let's take a look and talk a little bit about inflation, which is one of the main drivers of the economy and the real estate market. So what do we see? Inflation is finally is cooling off. Actually, the new release data showed that inflation is slowing down like faster than what we expected. It seems that 2022's higher federal funds rates are starting to tame inflation, and this is what we wanted to see. That's the purpose that we had like so many, like during the 2022, like about like five we had like rate hikes like in every like meeting from the Fed. So very good news on the side of consumer prices. I think we should expect inflation to average about like 4%. This is what we expect, like about 4% to be in 2023, which will help with mortgage rates to stabilize next year. And with, as you know, like the Federal Reserve also, even though there is no direct impact from the Fed's policies to the rates, we see that the commercial loan rates as well, there's a ripple effect, so are impacted from the Federal Reserve like policies. So when there is like the Federal Reserve takes like very like jumbo rate hikes that we had like with the 75 basis points, the last like 4 times, like before the recent one, we see that, yeah, the Fed's policies affect the commercial loan rates as well. But I think, but let's take a look now at how the commercial real estate is performing. Like after the strong rebound for the US economy, like in 2021, growth in 2022 has slowed in the face like of rising inflation, the household like income squeeze, and geopolitical like events that we had. So while the economy continues to deal with elevated inflation, because yeah, we see that inflation is cooling off, but it's still elevated about like 7%. So data shows that shows a slowdown in the growth of the commercial real estate as well. So demand, for example, for apartments and office spaces is lower compared to the previous quarters. Like while the industrial boom, like the increase of the industrial demand like continues, multifamily absorption and rent growth are decelerating, which means that they continue to rise, but at a slower pace. It's not so that it was like in the previous quarters, the first quarter, the second quarter, like of 2022. So multifamily absorption, to give you like in the last like 4 quarters, was below the pre-pandemic levels. In the meantime, rents rose year over year at a slower pace by less than a double-digit percentage like for the last 2 quarters. However, someone will from you could ask me, but why government data like from the inflation, the CPI data shows that rent growth is accelerating, that it's still accelerating, that it increases at a faster pace, like reaching like 40-year highs. So why don't like private and government data like don't align? So I would like to mention that the Consumer Price Index, which is the CPI, which provides like information about the rent inflation, uses data from the Consumer Expenditure Survey, the CSA, to determine like the level of prices like for goods and services. So while this is a survey, most renters, have in mind that most renters report the rent that they have locked in like earlier. So as a result, rent changes may take months to show up in government data. In contrast, what we see, like the private sector like publishes the listed rents, like the current rent prices. Thus, government data will likely show a decelerating like trend in rent prices after several months. Like so, maybe like in the starting like the second quarter or like at the end of the first quarter of 2023. However, even though we see this deceleration, multifamily housing demand, we expect to remain relatively strong, like giving rising higher mortgage rates, like double mortgage rates, more than double mortgage rates that we have, and home prices that continue to rise. People may be forced to rent for longer due to weakening affordability, because as we see that there are like significantly fewer buyers that they can afford to buy the typical home. There are like many of them that have already priced out. So, and especially first-time home buyers, since for them it's like a double whammy, we see that they have to deal with rising rents and also the rising borrowing cost that there is out there. But let's take a look now at the multifamily sector. So this is at the national level. So I would like to show you some data that we have for the Norwich, New London metro area for the multifamily sector. And what we see is that in our area here, we get that rents continue to rise faster than nationwide. So in the third quarter of the year, which is the latest data that we have, rents are about like 8% higher than the previous year, while like rents increased about like 6% in most of the areas across the country. Then we also see that there is a significantly lower vacancy rate in the Norwich, New London like metro area that can also explain why rents rise like faster than the national level. There are fewer available apartments in this area due to the demand that there is there, as we see that the vacancy rate is 2.6% compared to 5.4%, which is the national level. So when we have like a vacancy rate lower than another area, this shows how the lower vacancy rate means that we have stronger demand, translates, and is an indicator of a stronger like demand in the area. However, the absorption is not it's not performing very well, but we see that there are like a fewer like vacancy, a smaller vacancy rate in the area compared to nationwide. Then as the country navigates like hybrid work, excuse me, the office space continues to struggle. Like in the third quarter of 2022, about 1.34 million more square feet of office space was vacant and placed on the market that were leased. This is the national level that we see. Although more people like return to their offices after 4 quarters with positive net absorption, was doing like a little like better office space, demand for office space like dropped as the net absorption turned negative again. So in the third quarter of 2022, as a result, the market's net demand for office space like decreased relative to supply, and the vacancy rate unfortunately rose to about like 12.4% in the third quarter of 2022 from 12.3% in the previous quarter. And this comes while the office space, the office sector has the highest, have this in mind, that it has the highest vacancy rate across all sectors of the commercial real estate market. So the office space struggles, what we see in our area as well, but that the office space struggles in our area as well. So, and this is what we see. It's the transition from many people from to remote, and what we see that many of people continue with work that it can be done from home, continue to telework. However, we see in this sector again that rents, like in our area here, like that rents for office spaces rise faster than nationwide as vacancy rates are lower. So within the last 12 months, rents for office spaces in the area in Norwich, New London metro area increased about like 2% compared to 1% like nationwide, while the vacancy rate in the area is around like 8%, as you can see here in the slide, compared to 12% nationwide. And remember, a lower vacancy rate is an indicator of a stronger demand. So yes, we see, and we expect actually office space to continue to struggle in 2023, since many companies adopt the hybrid work, and people like employees don't need to be back to their offices, like at least not daily. They can be like in a hybrid mode, like 2 or 3 days per week, but we expect office space to struggle in 2023 as well. Then amid amid inflation, like elevated inflation and borrowing costs, consumers have started to cut spending. Nevertheless, compared to the previous year, like retail sales continued to advance as the labor market remains strong. Thus, the market at the national level, what we see is the market is showing signs of cooling due to elevated inflation. And this is something that we expect when there is like higher, it's more expensive to buy something, then yes, people usually they cut on spending. Because and even though inflation has slowed down, it's still elevated. It's about like 7%. So with inflation outpacing salary gains, retail sales activity may slow down even further in upcoming months. However, it's also worth like noting that consumers are continue to spend more than pre-pandemic, and I think this is very interesting, like statistic, specifically, and I included like in the slide here that. The US net absorption of retail spaces in the third quarter of the year was about like 60% higher than that, like in the same period, like in 2019. So I included in the chart here the 12-month net absorption for the third quarter of 2016, 2019, and 2022. And as you can see, current absorption continues to be higher than pre-pandemic, but it's lower than the 2016. Then what we see in the Norwich New London metro area, demand for retail space is weaker than nationwide, as this area has slower absorption like of retail space. In the third quarter of the year, the net absorption was negative, and the rents for retail spaces like rose about like 1.5% compared to the national level, which was like about like 5%. So yes, we see the retail sector a slower activity in our area, in the Norwich New London metro area compared to nationwide. Finally, I would like to mention about the industrial sector, because what we see is that the industrial sector continues to be strong pre-pandemic, and we see that in our area as well, in the Norwich New London metro area. So I included here some statistics for the industrial sector for the area in order to compare like with the pre-pandemic levels, like the third quarter of 2019, like before the pandemic hit our country. So, and what we get, first of all, net absorption was about like 40,000 square feet, while in 2019, the absorption was negative, which means that more retail spaces were available for lease than those that they were like occupied. So then rent prices for industrial spaces have increased by almost like 10% compared to 6% in 2019. So there is like faster and higher rent gains in the industrial space. And finally, there is significantly lower vacancy rate, about like 5% as of the third quarter of 2022 compared to 6.5%, which reflects the trend that the industrial sector, and specifically demand for industrial spaces, is stronger now than pre-pandemic. So this is, in a nutshell, I wanted to provide like what is the environment, like the commercial real estate is performing at the national level. And I wanted to give you some also statistics for the area, just to have an idea of what sectors are performing better than nationwide and the ones that are performing like a little like less relatively to the national level. And what we have seen is that the retail is performing like a little bit like slower than the national level. However, what we see for multifamily and the office space, yes, we see that both rents and vacancy rates show that we are doing better in the area compared to the national level. So this is in a nutshell like what is the environment out there, and I will be very happy to receive any questions that you have.
Thank you so much, Nadia.
And I will stop sharing my screen.
Okay. All right,
and excuse me, I have like a little bit of cough. I'm sorry.
A question. So one of the things, and thank you, that was very informative. I did have a question on the last slide.
Mhm.
I think it's just, I just didn't hear it correctly. So, or I just want to, I guess, confirm what I heard. So I saw that your industrial sector, this is our area. We had a negative absorption in Q3 of 2019 of 48,000. Did you
Yes.
say that that was like there was more vacancy than there was occupancy?
Yeah, so they're like when it's the negative, they're like adding like more for lease, they're available for lease than the ones that are occupied. And this
Okay.
is, I have to mention that this is like the 48,000 is in square feet. So the way that we measure like the absorption for the industrial space, the office space and the retail space is in the square footage. So it's about 48, like 50,000 square feet that are like more vacant than the like for lease, available for lease, than the ones that are like occupied.
Okay, and then when you see the positive gain of the 40,000, so what does that, I'm just trying to kind of put my brain around what that means as far as that positive.
So this is that they're like more occupied units than, so this is something that it shows how strong the demand is. So we have like more occupied than those that they're like, that they became like available for lease. So, and again, it's about like 40,000 square feet.
Okay.
So going into next year, Nadia, what, what are the general predictions for commercial space? Will it continue to get better, or what do you think?
For the office sector, unfortunately, office sector, we expect to struggle, continue to struggle since, and I think some of the ways to deal with this new situation, not new, but like with a hybrid job, is that sometimes they ask like for lease, like shorter lease for the office space, or sometimes they try to find ways that they can accommodate and make like it's better for every company. So, but what we expect for the office space is that, yes, it will continue to struggle in 2023. For multifamily, will continue to relatively to perform like better, to continue to be strong, but not at the same pace that it was like in 2022 and at the end of 2021. So we're going to have a slower rent growth, and this is what we see already from the data. Then for example, for the industrial space, yeah, we continue to see a very strong, and especially compared to the pre-pandemic, very strong activity. This will continue. But again, in every sector, we see a slowdown that we have, like especially now, like lately, with the rates that were like so high and then inflation were high. So in 2022, so we see this impact in 2022 for the commercial real estate, except like the residential that we also have there many challenges. Yeah,
I understand the office space, why that obviously with people being hybrid and everything has slowed, but what is your theory or thoughts on why the industrials grown?
Because it's like we see an increase of the warehouse, for example, jobs. Yes, okay. Yes, we see that more, and the logistics, like there are like many the job creation, especially in this particular like warehouse, retail, the job creation there, and the wholesale. So we see a very strong employment growth there and activity that we have since during the pandemic. Yeah, that was one of the reasons we had like internet, like transactions, like they were buying like everything like through internet. So there was like so high demand. So this activity made like the industrial sector to be like even bigger. So yes, and we expect to continue that, but not at the same pace that we had before. Like we see that the inflation started like to have an effect like in the commercial real estate as well. And unfortunately, we see a slowdown, but still is very challenging for many Black people, for the consumers. They can still feel the pain like from higher like consumer prices that they're out there.
And I have another question. You may not know this, but in general, like when you do I'm just curious what your Norwich and New London metro area covers. I mean, what's your, if you don't know exactly our area,
It's the
then
New
like,
London
what's your-
County.
Okay, county.
Yes, it's
Okay.
the New London County. So
So that
that's the
border.
only county that this metro area
Perfect. Okay.
covers. Yeah.
I have one other question. On the almost the last slide, it's the number 3, demand for retail space.
Mhm.
There was like a little graphic on the left side for nationwide, and it had
Yes.
different retail space types broken down. What is power center?
Data center.
So that's like tech
Yeah.
kind of stuff?
R&D.
Is that what that is? Okay, I just noted that, you know.
And what we see is that the general retail is the most, the biggest part. We also see the neighborhood centers, like, and this is what we see, even though people, they continue to want this in-person like contact sometimes, like when they buy. So what we see is that the second largest part of the absorption is like from the neighborhood centers.
Okay, I just didn't know that.
When you say neighborhood centers, are you including like the work share spaces? Like for you guys around here, Foundry 66, but like one place that somebody could rent 600 square feet and a bunch of people could in one building?
This one, I have to take a look at the CoStar. We get the data from CoStar, so I'm not sure what exactly they have, but it's neighborhoods like more, they're like the ones that you go and you buy, like grocery stores, like they're like, that you have the in-person contact there. But I can take a look and to see exactly like what is like included there.
I was curious about that type of rental space, the
Mhm.
work share space. I forget what you call it. What do you call it?
Co-work.
Co-work.
Co-space.
Do they even track that?
I don't know.
I don't think.
I can take a very quick look.
If you like, you can ask, the Joe and say that because currently have downtown have another one coming up, the Phoenix, so that's coming up. Okay, any more questions?
I haven't seen Sydney try to get on, and I don't see any email from her.
Yeah, Mimi, and I was not, I didn't have the time to
Right.
to text her or something. So I think maybe, because I know that she was on vacation, so I don't know if I can see in the calendar.
That's quite all right, Nadia. We really do
So
appreciate.
to the question, like neighborhood community centers, like supermarkets, and then inline like stores, a retail outlet like place continues like neighboring retailers.
Okay.
Yeah, but they don't have any. They don't have anything about like specifically what's the cut like there to include for the neighborhood. I'm sorry.
It was very nice of you to include New London and Norwich. I really appreciate that you were able to share those comparisons. That was very interesting.
Sure, and we actually produce this report, so we do the same like every quarter we update it. So around like late January, we're gonna have the Q4, the last quarter. So I will advise you like to take a look there, and we usually provide like on the first line like if it's like doing better or not, and then like we give like a comparison with the national level as well. So yeah, thank you. That's great to hear.
Okay. Thank you. And if there isn't anything else for you, then you can sign off. And I don't know if you want to give Sydney a shout. We'll still be on this call for a little bit to find out if she's able to join us. If not, that's fine too. You gave us a wealth of information today. Happy holidays to you and take care.
Happy holidays. Bye-bye. Have a good one. Bye. Thank you.
Hey, that was very interesting.
Yeah, good data.
I'm going to go ahead and stop recording for now so we can do our regular marketing session.